There's no life without struggle. You can do everything right, plan it, train for it, stay focused, and still get blindsided. The job disappears. The person you trusted walks out. The plan you built your future around falls through without warning. And just like that, what once felt certain now feels impossible. But that moment, as brutal as it is, comes with a decision. You can let it define you, or you can let it refine you. That's the line that separates those who stay stuck from those who rise. The Stoics knew this deeply. They didn't wish away hardship, they prepared for it. They trained themselves not just to endure the fall, but to grow through it. And if that's something you're building toward, resilience, clarity, personal power, then you're in the right place. Let's talk about how to turn your setbacks into something more, something stronger. Strategy 1. Face the facts without flinching. When everything starts crumbling, most people don't reach for courage. They reach for comfort. Not the kind that heals, but the kind that hides. We pick fights that don't matter, bury ourselves in distractions that keep our minds busy, but our souls frozen. It's easier to pretend we're fine than to admit we're not. Easier to blame someone else than to hold up the mirror. But here's the hard truth. Avoidance doesn't save you, it traps you. And the longer you run from the wreckage, the longer you stay stuck in it. The Stoics had a word for this kind of false protection: apatheia, a state of clarity that comes not from ignoring pain, but from understanding it. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." And that reaction, that first step forward, always begins with truth. Not the version you tell others to save face. Not the soft-edged summary you whisper to yourself to avoid feeling foolish. The truth, as raw and as clear as you can face it. So stop hiding behind the noise, sit down, get quiet. Not everything needs to be healed today, but it does need to be seen. What actually happened, not how it felt, but what occurred. Did you silence your intuition when it warned you? Did you tolerate what you should have walked away from? Did you keep hoping something would fix itself when you knew it wouldn't? The answers might sting, but that sting, that's your starting line. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Think about that. Every setback you don't face, every truth you bury, becomes a shadow that follows you into the next chapter. And then the next. You'll call it bad luck. You'll call it someone else's fault. But it was really just a truth you never owned. This isn't about shame. It's not about punishing yourself or dragging old wounds into the present. It's about control. It's about choosing not to let the same pattern write your future. Socrates believed that the unexamined life is not worth living. That wasn't a dramatic statement, it was practical. If you don't pause and reflect, if you don't dissect what went wrong, you're doomed to repeat it. Different day, same pain, just dressed in a new disguise. And here's where the strength comes in, writing it all down. No filters, no edits, just the truth. This is what I did. This is what I missed. This is what I allowed. This is what I avoided. Not to stay in the past, but to finally leave it. When your pen hits the page, something shifts. The fog lifts. The emotions lose their grip. And suddenly, you're not just someone who got knocked down. You're someone who's learning how to stand up stronger. Plato once wrote that truth is the beginning of every good thing. So let this be your beginning. You don't need clarity all at once. You don't need to solve it today. But you do need to stop pretending. Because clarity isn't handed to you. It's carved, one honest word at a time. Strategy 2. Stop letting failure define you. There's a quiet trap most people fall into after things fall apart. It doesn't come with sirens or warning signs. It slips in subtly, quietly whispering, "This is who you are now." One mistake, one failure, one collapse, and suddenly your entire identity gets wrapped around it. You go from "I failed" to "I am a failure." And that shift? It's dangerous, because the moment you accept that lie, you start living down to it. Aristotle said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. The same goes for failure. If you keep seeing yourself as the mistake, you'll keep showing up like it's all you have to offer. That missed opportunity, that breakup, that rejection, it becomes the lens through which you view everything else. And the more you wear it, the heavier it becomes. But here's what the Stoics understood. Who you are is not what happened to you. It's what you choose to do with it. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." You can't always control the setback, but you do control the meaning you assign to it, and that meaning determines everything. Think about it. You didn't lose your worth because someone walked away. You didn't become broken because something didn't go your way. You hit a wall, but that doesn't mean you stop walking. That's just life doing what it does, testing what you're made of. The moment you realize that your value doesn't live in results, it lives in your response. That job you lost, it taught you something. That mistake, it exposed a weakness and gave you a map to growth. But none of it, not one piece of it, gets to define you unless you hand over the pen. So stop giving your identity away to events. Stop calling yourself names based on a chapter you haven't even finished reading. Start asking better questions. Start with this. What would I do today if I didn't believe this setback defined me? Would you take the risk again? Would you speak up? Would you walk into that room differently? Socrates said, "The way to gain a good reputation is to endeavor to be what you desire to appear." That means showing up now as the person you want to become, not waiting for proof, not waiting for permission. You get to act from belief, not from memory, because who you were in the fall is not who you have to be in the rise. You're not your worst day. You're not the moment you lost control. You are the builder who gets back up, the architect who starts again, the student who learns and evolves. And no one, not your past, not their opinion, not your fear, gets to decide otherwise. You've been through something, yes, but you're not done. You're not over. And you're definitely not defined by the dust. You're defined by the rebuild. And that starts the moment you stop confusing who you are with what you've been through. Strategy 3. Reconnect with your why. There's something that happens when life hits you hard, not just emotionally but mentally, the kind of hit that knocks the breath out of your purpose, the kind that makes your why feel small. You wake up and the fire that used to move you, gone. That clear sense of mission, blurred by disappointment, by fear, by the quiet voice that says, maybe it's not worth it anymore. And when that voice grows louder than your reason, quitting doesn't just feel possible, it starts to feel reasonable. But pause right there, because this is where most people get it wrong. They think motivation comes first, then action. But it's the other way around. Your reason is what keeps the wheels turning when motivation breaks down. Stoicism teaches us that we don't control what happens, but we control how we frame it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke. Your perspective fuels your purpose. Lose one, and the other begins to slip too." So let's bring it back. Strip away the chaos and the discouragement. What made you start? What was the deeper reason before everything got messy? Maybe it was your family. Maybe it was that future you dreamed about, the one where you didn't just survive, you built something meaningful. Maybe it was the voice inside you that whispered, you were made for more, and for once, you believed it. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." That's not a feel-good quote. It's a reminder that there's something inside you that's been trying to grow. Every step forward you've ever taken was because something inside you refused to settle for the surface. And when setbacks hit, it's easy to forget that. Pain narrows your vision, but your why, that brings the focus back. And here's where it gets personal. If the people you love could see you now, your kids, your partner, your younger self, what would they need to see? Would they need to see someone who gave in when it got hard, or someone who stood back up, even if they had to crawl first? Maybe it's not even about them. Maybe it's about the version of you who remembers. The one who had nothing figured out, but still dared to want more. That version is still in there, still waiting, still watching. And the question is, are you showing them how to fall or how to rise? Because here's the truth most people never hear. Your reason doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be powerful. It needs to matter more than your fear, more than your frustration, more than the excuse to stay small. Plato once said, "The first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself." Reconnecting to your why, that's how that battle begins. Strategy 4. Change the way you speak about it. It's strange how the smallest words carry the heaviest weight. Sometimes it's not what happened that holds us back. It's the way we describe it, the way we repeat it to ourselves, the story we tell in the quiet moments when no one's listening but us. That story either becomes a cage or a key. It either keeps us circling the same pain or opens the door to something new. Aristotle once said, "Speech is the representation of the experiences of the mind." That wasn't just about language, it was about creation. Your words don't just describe your world, they shape it. If you call yourself broken, your behavior starts matching that identity. If you say you're stuck, your energy sinks, your decisions shrink, and suddenly you are stuck. Not because of the problem, but because of the phrase you gave it. The Stoics understood this with brutal clarity. Epictetus taught that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. What he meant was simple. The language we use creates emotional loops. If your vocabulary is full of defeat, your mindset becomes one of retreat. But if your language is framed around rebuilding, progress, clarity, even in the middle of chaos, you give yourself a path forward. Not because things are easier, but because you're thinking like someone who still believes there's something worth fighting for. Seneca once wrote, "Most powerful is he who has himself in his own power." Think about that. Every time you speak about your life, whether to others or to yourself, you're feeding something. You're either feeding fear or feeding strength. And it's subtle. It hides in phrases like, "Nothing ever works out for me," or "This always happens." Say those enough, and your mind builds a home there. Say them long enough, and you forget you ever had the right to speak differently. But the shift? It starts small. It starts with replacing "I'm lost" with "I'm searching," replacing "I failed" with "I learned." Not to lie to yourself, but to lead yourself. Socrates once said, "The greatest way to live with honor in this world is to be what we pretend to be." In other words, speak like the person you want to become. Use words that stretch you forward, not ones that drag you back. This doesn't mean you ignore what happened. It means you narrate it from a place of power. You don't say, "I lost everything." You say, "I'm starting again, this time with more wisdom." You don't say, "I'm broken." You say, "I'm healing." And in doing so, you remind your nervous system that movement is still possible, that your identity is still evolving, that your story isn't over. Because here's the truth. Language is strategy. It's one of the most overlooked tools of recovery. Plato said, The beginning is the most important part of the work, and often that beginning doesn't start with a decision or a plan. It starts with a sentence, one better sentence, spoken daily, until your mindset catches up, until your habits follow, until your life begins to shift. Strategy 5. Win small, win daily. It's funny how, when life knocks us flat, our minds go straight to the big fix. We think we need to make some grand move, take the leap, reinvent everything overnight. But that's not how real change works. Not when you're in the pit. Not when everything inside you is just trying to remember how to breathe again. When you're low, it's not the big leap that saves you. It's the small step. The ordinary, unglamorous, steady step forward. The Stoics had no patience for drama. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." He wasn't talking about climbing mountains in a day. He was talking about movement in the face of resistance. He was talking about putting one foot in front of the other, especially when you don't feel ready. That's the secret. Action doesn't wait for motivation. It creates it. We tend to overlook the power of tiny wins. You clean one drawer, suddenly your space feels lighter. You send one message you've been avoiding, and your mind clears. You take a 10-minute walk, and somehow your energy shifts. It's not magic, it's momentum. And momentum doesn't come from breakthroughs, it comes from repetition, basics, daily, deliberate effort. Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." Let that sink in. You don't become strong by talking about change. You become strong by stacking small acts of integrity, by doing the thing, especially when no one's watching, especially when it doesn't look impressive, because consistency is louder than any comeback speech. Plato believed that the beginning is the most important part of the work, and yet it's the part most people skip. They wait until they feel ready. Wait for clarity, wait for a sign, wait until the fog clears. But readiness doesn't show up on its own. It's built, one action at a time, one checked box, one completed task. That's how your brain begins to trust you again. That's how your nervous system shifts from shutdown to motion. So ask yourself, what's one small win I can earn today? Not 10, not a life overhaul, just one. Can you drink a glass of water first thing in the morning? Can you reply to the message you've been dodging? Can you put your phone down and breathe for 5 minutes? If the answer is yes, do it. If the answer is no, choose something even smaller, because it's not about the size of the action, it's about the signal it sends. I'm still in this. Aristotle taught that we become just by performing just actions, temperate by performing temperate actions, brave by performing brave actions. In other words, identity is earned, not wished for. You don't wait until you feel like the person you want to become. You act like them now in small ways. You don't rebuild by shouting into the void. You rebuild by doing the dishes, showing up to the workout, finishing the thing you promised yourself you'd finish. Let go of the idea that it has to be dramatic to count. The real comeback doesn't start when the spotlight hits. It starts in the quiet, uncelebrated moments where you choose to move. Not perfectly, just honestly. Because movement is what unlocks belief, and belief is what rewrites everything. Strategy 6. Guard your energy like a fortress. There's something people don't talk about enough when they talk about healing, how exhausting it is, not just the pain itself, but the noise that follows it. The opinions, the explanations, the questions, the pressure to keep performing like nothing's changed. You're in survival mode, holding yourself together with threads, and somehow still trying to be available to everyone else. But here's the hard truth. You can't rebuild your life if you keep leaking your energy in 100 different directions. The Stoics were clear about this. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it." In modern terms, you don't have to let everything in. You don't have to hand out pieces of yourself just because someone asked. When you're hurt, your mind is fragile, your emotions are raw, and your energy is limited. So why waste it explaining your pain to people who only listen to respond, or worse, to judge? You don't owe everyone access to your process. Not every text needs a reply. Not every call deserves your time. And not every opinion needs your attention. Think about that. You wouldn't leave your door wide open during a storm. So why are you letting people wander in and out of your mind when you're in the middle of rebuilding? Carl Jung once said, "The sole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light in the darkness of mere being." That light doesn't burn brighter by overextending. It burns brighter by focusing, by guarding what fuels it. This isn't about isolation. It's about intention. It's about curating your environment so it supports healing, not prolongs damage. Plato believed that the part can never be well unless the whole is well. And how do you take care of the whole? You protect your peace. You take an honest inventory of your life. Who or what drains you the second they show up? What thoughts pull you into a loop you've already outgrown? What routines keep you stuck in survival mode when you're trying to move toward strength? Socrates once said, "Beware the barrenness of a busy life." Busyness isn't always productivity. Sometimes it's just avoidance, filling space with tasks, calls, and conversations that leave you more tired than you were before. But healing doesn't happen in chaos. It happens in stillness. It happens in boundaries. It happens when you decide that not everything or everyone gets access to your energy anymore. Protecting your space isn't selfish, it's strategic. You're not cutting people off out of bitterness. You're choosing to build from a place of clarity. And that means guarding your inputs, your conversations, your content, your inner dialogue. If it doesn't serve your recovery, it doesn't belong in your atmosphere. Strategy 7. Discipline over drama. Some days, everything in you will want to pause. You'll wake up with that heavy silence in your chest, that quiet feeling that says, maybe not today. And it's tempting, so tempting, to listen to it, to skip the routine, to break the promise, to postpone the work. But here's the difference between people who rebuild and people who remain: discipline. The choice to move even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. The truth about growth is that it doesn't arrive through inspiration. It arrives through repetition, through showing up on the dull days, the low days, the nothing is changing days. Because the people who rise aren't superhuman. They're just consistent. Discipline is a declaration. It's you saying, "I've decided who I'm becoming, and I'm acting like it now, not when I feel like it. Not when the results are obvious, now." You don't wait for motivation. Motivation is emotional. It drifts. Discipline is structural. It stays. The Stoics understood this deeply. They trained their minds to detach from temporary feelings and anchor to long-term values. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." That mastery, it begins with discipline. This isn't about perfection. It's not about never missing a beat. It's about holding the line. The version of you that you're building doesn't need you to be flawless. It needs you to be committed, to honor the process, to show up for the hard reps. Because let's be honest, training is rarely easy. Growth doesn't feel graceful when you're in it. It's messy, it's uncertain, it's slow. But you don't do the work because it's fun. You do it because your future is worth it. Carl Jung once wrote, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." And what happens when you look inside on those low days? You see the truth, that you're capable of more than your mind is telling you, that you can act without enthusiasm, That discipline isn't some rigid prison. It's freedom. The kind of freedom that comes from knowing that you are dependable, that you keep your word to yourself, that your actions aren't driven by moods but by meaning. Socrates believed that the secret of change is to focus all of your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. And that's what daily discipline really is. You're not wrestling the past anymore. You're laying bricks for the future, even if they're small, even if they don't look like much yet. Eventually, those bricks become a foundation, a framework, a life that doesn't crumble under pressure because it was built with intention. Strategy 8. Use the pain, don't carry it. There's a moment after every hard fall where silence creeps in. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that feels like fog, like something heavy sitting on your chest, impossible to explain, and in that silence pain speaks, quietly at first, then louder, until it becomes impossible to ignore. Most people, when that voice shows up, try to mute it. They distract, numb, scroll, overwork. Because facing pain head-on, that takes a kind of bravery most never practice. But if you want to grow, not just recover but grow, you have to stop avoiding the lesson that pain came to deliver. The Stoics didn't see pain as punishment. They saw it as preparation. Seneca wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." They believed pain wasn't something to escape. It was something to explore, to lean into, because pain is information. It shows you where you've been asleep at the wheel. It reveals the cracks in your foundation. It exposes the places where your standards dropped or your voice stayed silent. So ask yourself the hard question, what is this pain trying to teach me? Did you stay in something too long because it was familiar? Did you quiet your intuition for the sake of keeping peace? Did you ignore the tension, hoping it would just go away on its own? These aren't accusations, they're invitations. And if you're brave enough to answer, you'll walk away with more clarity than any self-help book could give you. Carl Jung said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. Growth doesn't happen in comfort. Comfort keeps you where you are. Pain, it forces reflection. It sharpens your awareness. It demands that you look at what's broken, not to dwell in it, but to understand it, to clean it out, to make sure you don't carry it forward." Plato once said that all learning has an emotional base. Pain is emotional, but it's also a form of learning if you're willing to sit with it. Not dramatize it, not spiral in it. Just sit, still, curious, and ask, what is this showing me about myself? Because underneath the sting, there's almost always a mirror. One that reflects not who you were pretending to be, but who you really are, and who you could become. This isn't about loving the pain, it's about learning from it, using it, letting it carve out space for something better. Because at the end of the day, it's not the fall that changes you. It's the decision to face it with your eyes open and rise anyway. Strategy 9. Choose who you're becoming. There's a strange pressure that creeps in after a setback. The pressure to get back to normal, to return to the person you were before it all went sideways. But let's pause on that for a second. Why would you want to go back to being the version of you that couldn't survive the storm? That version didn't make it through. You did. Bent maybe, bruised for sure, but still standing, still learning, still here. And that matters, because everything you've seen, every scar you carry, it taught you something about who you are, about what you can take, about what you'll never accept again. The Stoics believed that adversity wasn't just a nuisance, it was the furnace that shapes character. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What stands in the way becomes the way." So don't waste the fire. Don't rush to erase the signs of it. Use it to forge someone wiser, someone clearer, someone newer. The key is not to bounce back, but to evolve forward. Let go of who you were trying to be before the storm hit. Let go of the habits that led you to burnout, the relationships that blurred your boundaries, the thinking that made you shrink. Start asking instead, what kind of person do I want to be now that I've seen what I've seen? Aristotle believed that knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. And after everything you've faced, you know more about yourself than ever. What you tolerate, what you need, where your real strength lives. That knowledge isn't just insight, it's leverage. Use it to set new standards for how you show up, for what you accept, for what you expect from the people around you and from yourself. That old version of you had excuses, had patterns that kept repeating, had fears dressed up as logic. But you, now, you've outgrown all that. You walk different, you think deeper, you speak with more intention. And if you haven't started doing those things yet, now's the time. Plato once said, "The measure of a man is what he does with power, and the greatest power you have is the ability to decide who you become after everything you've lost. So define it. Don't let the past decide for you. Don't live like the wound is still open. Say it out loud if you have to. The new version of me walks like this, talks like this, moves like this." Then act accordingly, with your habits, with your choices, with your energy. Let the old identity fade, not out of shame, but because you've outlived it. Socrates taught that the soul should always be improving itself, not just reacting to the world, but reshaping from the inside out. That's your job now, to lead yourself, not back to safety, but forward into strength, not to what was, but into what's next. Because you didn't just survive the storm, you became someone new inside it, and that version, that's the one worth building on. Strategy 10. Finish the story your way. Sometimes life hits you with a moment so sharp, so final feeling that it tricks you into thinking the story's over. A rejection, a failure, a betrayal. It happens, and suddenly everything feels smaller. Your future shrinks, your confidence fades, and your identity, it starts to tie itself to that one moment, like nothing else ever existed before it. But here's the truth. It wasn't the ending. It was just a pause, a comma, not a period. In Stoic thought, there's no such thing as a meaningless event. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Look well into thyself. There is a source of strength which will always spring up if thou wilt always look." In other words, no matter how far you feel you've fallen, there's something inside you, something deeper than circumstance, that's still untouched, still capable, still willing. The setback didn't take your power, it just convinced you to stop using it. But your life, it's not done, not even close. You still have the pen in your hand, and what you write next, that's what defines you. Not the stumble, not the silence, the next word, the next decision, the next step forward. That's what separates people who stay stuck in the fall from people who rise into something better. Carl Jung once said, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." That quote isn't meant to decorate your wall, it's meant to wake you up. You get to choose. You always did. The pain may not be your fault, but the recovery, that's yours to lead. You're not at the mercy of the past. You're the author of what happens next. Aristotle believed that hope is a waking dream, and hope, real hope, is not some wishful fantasy. It's a commitment to keep going. It's the decision to hold the pen steady, even when your hands are shaking. It's saying, yes, that happened, but here's what happens next. And then living that rewrite one day at a time. Socrates reminded us that to move the world, we must first move ourselves. So maybe that's where you start, not with a loud comeback, not with a public declaration, but with one quiet promise to yourself: I'm not letting that moment be the ending. You decide to keep writing, boldly, quietly, on purpose. You stop handing over authorship to pain. You stop letting failure narrate your future, and you start creating a new story. Not perfect, but powerful. A story with scars, yes, but also with strength. A story with lessons, with comebacks, with resilience that wasn't born in comfort, but forged in struggle. You were never meant to stay in the place that broke you. The fall wasn't your finish line. It was your turning point. What you do from here matters far more than what happened back there. So walk forward, not as who you were, but as who you're becoming. A little wiser, a little stronger, a lot more intentional. Thank you for being a part of Stoic Journal. This story's just getting started, and we'll be right here when you're ready for the next chapter.